Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for attending my Energetics webinar. I'm Justine, founder of Healer's Harvest and facilitator of the Herbalists Collaborative, where we come together in community to deepen into our herbal practice. This webinar will provide you with a glimpse of what we cover in my Energetics for Herbalists online course, which is going on sale today, and I have a coupon code for you on the last slide, so stay tuned for that. Also, feel free to reach out to me with any questions after the webinar. In my Energetics for Herbalists course, you will discover the art of energetics-based herbal medicine. This course will guide you through the fundamental principles of energetics and is suitable for beginners as well as anyone interested in furthering their studies. To study energetics is to learn a language that we were born to understand. By studying the 5 elements, earth, air, fire, water, and ether, we'll explore the core patterns that shape all of nature. It is believed that all things in existence contain the qualities of these elements in different variations. The goal of studying energetics is to understand these patterns and use them to create balance, health, and harmony. This approach encourages you to be present and attentive, engaging your senses and learning through direct perception, as Sajah Popham beautifully describes it. You'll develop a profound and intuitive understanding of plants, the human body, and their intricate interactions. This experiential knowledge enables you to craft personalized and effective herbal protocols for your clients. Energetics for Herbalists is an introductory course, the perfect stepping stone to joining the Herbalist Collaborative. If you're wondering about your readiness for advanced studies, start here. You'll delve into Ayurvedic philosophy, learning about the 5 elements, the energetics of temperature, moisture, and tone, the 5 flavors, and the 6 tissue states as taught by Matthew Wood and Kat Meyer. Additionally, you'll gain insights into the history of herbalism, herbal actions, basic phytochemistry, and physiology. By the end of the course, you'll be equipped to integrate these concepts into your herbal practice and ready to join the Herbalist Collaborative, where we gather in community to put it all into practice. So thanks again for being here. I want to just give you a little bit of insight about who I am, how I came to be here, and how and why I do what I do. So I'm Justine, as I said, founder of Healer's Harvest, facilitator of the Herbalist Collaborative, and instructor for the Energetics for Herbalists course. I'm also the co-founder of Gather, a Northeast herbal conference. I started on my plant path in 2011 when I volunteered at Rootwork Farm in upstate New York. That was a divine intervention moment where I quit my jobs and decided I wanted to learn how to grow food because that felt like one of the most important things that I could educate myself on and important skill to have. So it just so happened that that farm was an herb farm, and she introduced me to the International Herb Symposium, which I have been both an attendee and vendor at. And it is a biannual conference that goes on and just happened to be in Massachusetts. And then she also introduced me to Herb Farm, which is in Southern Oregon, and they have an incredible 3-month internship that I was able to take part in. It was very introductory. I learned a lot of different things, and I also volunteered or worked on their herb farm in exchange for 150 hours of education. So it was a great introduction to all things herbalism, and from there I knew I wanted to continue my studies, so I went on to some more advanced studies with the Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism. I did an online advanced herbalism course with the New England Academy of, the Herbal Academy of New England. And then I worked and also studied with Mary Blue at Pharmacy Herbs in Providence, Rhode Island. And finally, I studied with Brittany Nickerson at Time Herbals, and I took her advanced apprenticeship. So all of these combined certainly qualifies me to teach and to work with clients to try to find and establish health using herbs to do so. It has been a journey for me to figure out my niche in this herbal community. And actually what I enjoy doing is connecting in community, helping people connect with nature, and also helping other herbalists find their path in this community. So, guided by devotion to personal healing and a vision of collective wellness, I founded Healer's Harvest in 2021 with a mission rooted in health empowerment, community, and a healing connection to nature. Connect with nature and community. That is what it's all about for me. Our mission is to promote physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being through meaningful connection with nature, community, and self. And as you might be able to imagine, this has been my own personal healing path. And, I sort of had to find my way toward my spirituality. I had to find my way toward belonging, and herbalism happened to be at the center of all of it. And yeah, most importantly, this even just launching Healer's Harvest and creating these programs has been a way for me to connect deeper to myself. And this is sort of a mission. It feels like my life's purpose is to help people to heal and find serenity through nature and community and a healthy relationship to self. So how do I do this? I offer 3 levels of online herbal education with a strong focus on energetics and community. The 3 programs are Energetics for Herbalists, the Herbalist Collaborative, and our newest interactive herbal workshops. Energetics for Herbalists is an online program suitable for beginners as well as anyone interested in furthering their herbal studies. Students learn the foundations of an energetics-based practice of herbal medicine. It's also the primer for the Herbalist Collaborative, perfect for those wanting to join with confidence. The Herbalist Collaborative is our signature program, launched in 2022. It is a live, interactive, and intermediate level program designed for herbalists to develop intimate connections with plants and community while advancing their practitioner skills and businesses. This is our signature program because it is the first one I created, and I created it because I felt like it was what I needed, and it was sort of missing in the herbal community. I wasn't finding exactly what I wanted. I am not someone who wants to create like a clinical herbal practice, and there's plenty of options out there to go that route, but I was somebody who wanted to deepen into my skills with herbs and also with kind of helping support people on their path, their health, finding balance in their health. So I also was missing a sense of strong community because these programs that I took were between being online and in different states. I just didn't feel rooted in a community that was tight knit, and so I really yearned for that. And so that's why I started the Herbalist Collaborative. It was a space where, people like myself who had countless herbal certificates, but not sure where I wanted to go next, but still wanting to advance my studies, is a place for all of us to come together in support of one another's studies and learn together. And so one of the biggest, or I'd say most profound practices that we do in the Herbalist Collaborative is our plant meditations. And this is an opportunity to really deepen into our presence and understanding of plants through our own direct perception of them and their own experience with them. So we're learning from the plants themselves rather than focusing so much on all the book work and all the studying and all the literature. It's actually really building that personal connection and personal experience and learning through your own experience with the plant. So that's one of the best parts, I think, of the Herbalist Collaborative. But the community, again, is central to it. And we have invited teachers like Kat Meyer, who have been in the field for 30 years, teaching energetics. She's an author of Energetic Herbalism. She came in last year and walked us through case studies. And so we learned a ton through her. So each year it's a little different, and we sort of develop it as we go to support the needs of the group. And so if you're looking for that tight-knit community and more learning, but also sort of looking to nourish your own healing path and your own connection, strengthen that connection with nature, this is the place to do it. That is the intention behind the Herbalist Collaborative. So I welcome you to join. And finally, our interactive herbal workshops. This is new this year, which is really exciting, and it will be some live monthly Zoom workshops featuring renowned guest herbalists such as Kat Meyer, and provide a unique opportunity to learn and connect with our greater herbal community. These individual workshops are an opportunity to take advanced classes from the industry's greatest teachers. So what's wonderful about this is this section of our offerings is included in the Herbalist Collaborative, but what we're doing is essentially opening up this offering to anybody. So it really broadens our ability to connect with a greater community of people, and also for those of you who want to be involved but don't necessarily want to join the Herbalist Collaborative and make that commitment, you can still come and kind of be a part of the community and learn from really experienced and renowned herbalists like Kat Meyer. And so why do I do this? And ultimately it's to promote well-being. So my primary purpose is to encourage collective well-being through spiritual connection with nature as our true parents, our creator, and Mother Earth, a sense of belonging to community, and authentic self-expression. I believe these principles are foundational for well-being and represent the greatest contribution I can make to humanity and our planet. When we feel these connections, we cherish and care for one another and the earth, our home, and we cultivate a sense of awe for the mysterious, creative force from which we have all come from, reminding us of the sacredness of life. Herbalism is a powerful instrument for promoting these principles, and I'm passionate about sharing it with the world, and education has proven to be the most effective way for me to fulfill this mission. Energetics, where herbalism meets spirituality. So this is kind of speaks again to the why I do this work. It is part of a rich spiritual path for me. And what I love about energetics is that it's just rooted in ancient healing practices, and it is observable, and it's like, rather than all the science and the literature, it's like an embodied way to look at the world, really, to experience the world and see the world through the lens of energetics is to be present, and is to use your senses, and is to be informed and make decisions off of what you see, what you hear, what you smell, kind of embodying the knowing. And I've always been a bit of a truth seeker, and so this feels like a practice that it's a language, like I always say, we were born to understand. It's intuitive, it's accessible, and you can't really deny it. It is what it is, and we can all sense it. So this is where herbalism meets spirituality. Herbal energetics is an ancient and intuitive concept. Ancient traditions viewed plants as living entities with energies and spirits, using them to balance the body in harmony with nature. Energetics is about exploration, connection, and relationship with nature. It teaches us to see the elemental patterns of nature in both plants and people, and to use those patterns to create balance and health. To practice herbal energetics is to arrive in presence and use our senses, attention, and direct perception to feel, connect with, and learn from the plants. So within this umbrella of energetics is the 5 elements, the energetic qualities, the 6 tissue states, and the 6 flavors, and this is what we will be diving into moving forward here. Here's a quote from Kat Meyer. In Ayurvedic philosophy, all matter originates in cosmic consciousness, and this is manifest in male and female energy. The ancient seers perceived that consciousness is expressed through 5 basic elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. In Ayurveda, the universe is believed to be composed of 5 fundamental elements. They are considered the building blocks of the universe and are integral to understanding the nature of all things, including the human body and medicinal plants. I like to think of the concept of the elements as a distillation of life down to its smallest and most basic elemental parts. These parts, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, provide us with a framework that mirrors nature in order for us to observe the most basic patterns in life. Once we have the lens to be able to see these patterns, we have the ability to influence them. So, ether has spacious, empty, and expansive qualities. It represents the space that accommodates all other elements. Air has light, cold, dry, and dispersing qualities and is associated with movement. Fire has hot, dry, light, and clear qualities and represents transformation. Water has moistening, cooling, cohesive, receptive, and fluid qualities and represents hydration and nourishment. And earth has stable, solid, dense, and structural qualities and represents the foundation of the world. So these energetic qualities are not necessarily literal, but represent a spectrum of qualities that exist in relation to all other things. All of these plants here contain the qualities of all 5 elements in different variations. So for example, both water and aloe embody the element of water. Water is essentially the truest representation of the element, while aloe contains mucilage, which has more physical substance, more earth than water itself, but it still is a great representation of the water element. This next photo is oats, and oats is a grass, and so they are very much influenced by the air, and you can tell just in the way they move, which we mentioned in the previous slide, that air kind of represents movement, lightness, and dryness. And so just the way that this plant shows up in the world, it's moving, it's being blown by the wind easily. It's also very dry when compared to something like aloe. When you break open the plant, the oat plant, there's just going to be far less water in there. So you can see that, all of these plants are going to have the 5 elements within them, but some are just going to represent one more than the other. And so while aloe really represents water very well, oat represents air pretty well, because they're mostly because of the lack of fluid and water in that element, or in that plant. So the final picture here is of a cayenne pepper, which is a great and obvious representation of fire in the way that it burns your skin. If it touches your skin, it creates redness, and it is in fact red itself. Like everything about this plant indicates heat, and so that's how you might see the fire element represented in a plant. And here's some examples of the way that the elements show up in the body, right? So the skeleton is just a very clear earth element. It's the structure of our body. It's solid. It's foundational. Water, this is a picture of sweat just beating on someone's skin, and our bodies are made up of mostly water, and this is a very clear representation in the sweat of our skin. And fire this is an example. There's a picture of food in the shape of a stomach, and the fire element is representative here in digestion, where it's actually transforming one thing to another. It's transforming the food we eat into the energy that we use, and also into our actual physical bodies. So these are 3 ways that you can see the elements in the body. I've created a little pop quiz here. So match each of the 5 elements to their corresponding bodily representation. Ether, air, fire, water, and earth are the elements. And so what we're doing, the goal here is to match them to these examples 1 through 5. So I'll read through the examples, and then I'll give you a minute to think it over and see if you can make these correlations. 1, muscles, bones, and bodily tissues. 2, breath peristalsis, which, if you're unfamiliar, is the automatic movement of our digestive system that's moving our food and what we eat through. And overthinking. 3, blood, saliva, and sweat. 4, metabolism, digestion, and mental processing. And 5, space, cavities of the body, joints, and spirit. So let's take the ether element here, and I'll give you a second to think about it, but which of these 5 would correlate best with ether? So the answer is number 5. Space, cavities of the body, joints, and spirit. You just get the sense here. I mean, we've already discussed that ether represents space, spaciousness, right? And it's the space in which everything else exists. So space between the cells, space in the cavities of the body, space within the joints, and spirit kind of representing the non-physical. Okay, so the next one, air. I'll give you a second to see if you can figure out which one it correlates with. So this one matches best with number 2. Breath, peristalsis, and overthinking. I think breath is pretty obvious in the way that there's just this constant movement, and we know that air represents movement, but also it's the very physical connection that our bodies have with the air. And then peristalsis, which I explained, is that movement of food through our digestive system. So there again, the air representing movement. Overthinking it's a really great way to start thinking of the elements in our bodies, in a mental capacity and even in an emotional capacity. So overthinking, you can just think of that as like movement in the mind, like lots of activity, lots of movement happening. And so that could be representative of the air element and essentially an imbalance of the air element in the mind. Okay, so next would be fire. And fire matches best here with number 4, metabolism, digestion, and mental processing. And again, so the fire element is all about transformation. One of my friends says it's about transforming the physical into the ethereal, and it's just such a true definition. Like when you consider building a fire, you're putting like physical wood in these logs onto a fire, and they are getting burned down to ash, down to basically nothing, and kind of enters into the ethereal. So metabolism, digestion, it's that transformation of the physical into what our bodies need, which is either energy or to store as nourishment in our bodies. And then mental processing, again, thinking of it in the mind. And I love this thought of like, when incoming input information comes in, we think about it and we sit with it, and sometimes it transforms into a belief or an idea or an emotion, and that is what we mean here by mental processing. And it's nice to be able to start thinking of that as like a fire energy, as far as in our mental space goes. Okay, next is water. And so water matches with number 3 here. Blood, saliva, and sweat. Again, I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory, but all 3 of these are examples of fluids, the more watery essences of our body. So the blood, saliva, and sweat. And then finally we have earth, which matches with number 1, muscle, bones, and bodily tissue. And again, that's that structure. Okay, so we just wrapped up talking about the 5 elements, and now we'll move on to the energetic qualities. The patterns and expression of the elements are known as qualities. They are hot, cold, damp, dry, in relaxation and constriction. It is helpful to think of them in terms of temperature, warming and cooling, moisture, moistening and drying, and tone, relaxed and constricted. In herbalism, we use these qualities to classify the energetics of plants as well as human tissue states. So, starting with temperature. Plants that have a warming energetic quality contain patterns of the fire element. Fire transforms and moves, as we've already discussed. It is stimulating to organs and tissues and causes energy and blood to flow. It stokes the digestive fire and can heat us up from the inside out. It helps to thin bodily fluids and clear out stagnation. It's associated with the pungent flavor. And plants that have a cooling energetic quality contain the patterns of the earth element. Earth energy is building and grounding. The earth element in plants has a slowing and constricting effect on the tissues. They are sedating to overactive tissue states and reduce heat and inflammation, which is what makes them cooling. And it's associated with a sour flavor. And you can kind of sense here that these are opposite each other. So, in the body, if we're trying to create balance and we have a heat, hot, maybe red inflamed tissue state, we're going to take our cold energetic and apply that to create balance. Okay, so moisture. Plants that have a moistening energetic quality contain patterns of the water element. Water nourishes, hydrates, softens, and lubricates, and it's associated with the sweet and salty flavors. Plants that have a drying energetic quality contain patterns of the air element. Air is responsible for movement via expansion and contraction. It cools and dries. Plants with the air element will help to remove excess fluids from the body as they contract, tonify, and tighten the tissues. It's associated with the astringent flavor. And so again, you see here that these are opposite each other. So if you have a dry condition in the body, you're going to add a moist energetic to it, and vice versa. Okay, and finally we have tone. I have a note at the top here which talks a little bit about what's called the ECR cycle. It's an additional system of energetic classification from the physiomedicalist tradition that looks at the ways that plants can have a relaxing, contracting, or stimulating effect on the tissues via the nervous and musculoskeletal systems. Tone refers to a plant's ability to create, astringe, or reduce, relax tension in the tissues. Tone is the third key factor in energetic herbalism, complementing temperature and moisture to understand an herb's action. So essentially, on top of what we already discussed, the temperature and moisture of the plant, we're now looking at tone and the way it either astringes or reduces and relaxes tension in the tissues. So relaxation, we're working with relaxants, which help relieve tension within the nervous and musculoskeletal system. They are used for constrictive tissue states and are often nervines and spasmolytics, and many are acrid in taste and most are cooling. The opposite of relaxant is astringent. So this is like if you have somebody with really, really tight muscles, right? Like their tissues need to relax. They're way too constricted. And so these kinds of nervines and spasmolytics are going to help which tend to have an acrid taste, by the way, are going to help to relax the tissue. And then there's contraction. It's opposite and otherwise known as astringency. Astringents increase tissue tension and tone. So it's doing the opposite action on the tissues. They're used for the relaxed tissue state to create contraction and strengthen the tissues. Astringents are locally drying and systemically moistening. As they contract the tissues, they wring out fluids, but at the same time, they strengthen and tone the tissues, leading to optimal health, nourishment, and hydration, which is what makes them systemically moistening. So excitation is sort of an additional tool to look for, or we have relaxation and astringency looking at tone, but excitation doesn't quite look at the tone of tissues. More it has to do with the ways the tissues can be stimulated. And so echinacea is a really good example of that. If you haven't ever tried echinacea, you would find that when you ingest it, it creates an intense, stimulating, energetic feel in the mouth. I'm trying to think what else to compare that to. There's a couple other herbs that do that too, but echinacea is probably the most common. So if you haven't felt that, I definitely recommend getting yourself either an echinacea tincture or just even munching on the leaf or flower or seed if you ever see the plant. And so this is a different type. I sort of lumped it into the tone category, but it is separate, and that's why I mentioned the ECR cycle, because that is where it comes from. And it's so stimulant remedies increase blood flow or innervation to an area. Stimulants are used primarily for depressed tissue states. Most of these remedies are warming, but some, such as yarrow and echinacea, are cooling. So this is just, it's helpful to have this additional classification system because sometimes there is contradictory information in the literature, and it is one of the more frustrating parts about studying herbal medicine. So you don't really know what to believe, right? And so this is why I've developed the Herbalist Collaborative. This is also why I love herbal energetics, because when we study these kind of terms and ideas, we can then taste these plants and have our own personal experience with these plants and identify ourselves what they're good for or what energetic quality they might have. So with the relaxation, you might feel that release in tension. With the contraction, you're going to feel the tension, the astringency. And with excitation, you might just feel stimulation. And again, the best example I can think for that is something like echinacea, in the way that it causes a stimulating action on the tissues. And like it says, it's used for the depressed tissue state, which we will discuss further in coming slides, but that's what it's doing, is bringing vitality to the tissues, but it's not necessarily contracting or relaxing. This is pretty advanced, so no worries if it's hard to follow. It was hard for me to follow, and I'm still learning, so we'll get there. Okay, so here are some examples of another pop quiz. Match each of the energetic qualities to their corresponding bodily representation. So we're going to be looking at the energetics: hot, cold, damp, dry, relaxed, and constricted, and I'll read through the examples here. 1, increased metabolic activity or excitement. 2, swelling, sweating. 3, decreased metabolic activity or depression. Depression can be referred to, mentally depressed, but also tissues can be depressed in what that means is they're sort of non-responsive, they're lacking vitality. 4, cracked skin, dehydration. 5, runny nose. And 6, muscle spasm. I just noticed my 5 and 6 are out of order, but that's fine. Okay, so starting with hot, I'll give you a minute to look through these examples and see if you can match them. Okay, so hot matches best here with number 1, increased metabolic activity and excitement. So increased metabolic activity is kind of, you could think of like an overstimulated system or organ, like when your heart is pounding, that's an increased metabolic activity. Or when you have diarrhea, that's an increased metabolic activity. Inflammation, and increased metabolic activity. So inflammation, or it's essentially the immune system responding to what it feels like an attack. And so it's sending blood flow, sending fluid. It's trying to work out the issue. It's actually a very healthy, natural response of the body, but it can kind of become overstimulated and in excess, and that's when it starts to cause damage. So you can think of that as excitement in the tissues when it's overstimulated, and that is all correlates with the hot energetic. Cold. So you might remember from going through the energetics that they all sort of have opposite effects, right? So that's a little bit of a clue here. But cold represents or matches best with number 3, decreased metabolic activity and depression. And you basically can see that as the opposite of number 1, the increased metabolic activity. So this is where tissues or organs or body systems are lacking. They're underactive. They are non-responsive. They're slowed, sedated, and they need vitality brought back to them. And so even depression, you can think of that too, like whether it's in the tissue states or the mind, it's dragged down, it's not working properly, and it needs some support, some nourishment, some excitation, some stimulation. So yes, number 3 matches with the cold energetic and is quite the opposite of number 1, which matched with hot. So next is damp. I think this one's mostly obvious. It's number 2, swelling and sweating, and those are just really clear visuals of dampness, right? Swelling is when fluid is sort of is pooling and creating that swell. It's stagnating and it needs to be moved, but that's like an excess damp situation. And then sweating it's damp, but it's not stagnant. It's sort of overproducing, right? Like it's secreting, it's flowing. Let's call it flowing dampness, whereas swelling is more of a stagnating dampness. Okay, dry. Which one correlates best with dry? So this one matches with number 4, cracked skin and dehydration. Pretty self-explanatory there, but both indicators of a lack of water. So it's that opposite again, and that would be representative of a dry condition that needs to be moistened. Moving on to relaxed. This one might feel a little tricky, but relaxed is going to match best with number 5, runny nose. And so the way that is a relaxed tissue state is the reason that the nose is running, which you might also think of as that excess dampness running, the fluid is like flowing through the tissue. The reason that it's able to do that is because the tissue state itself is relaxed. It's too relaxed, in fact. Normally, tissues are tight, they're tone, and they don't allow water or fluid to run through them. But when they're relaxed, for whatever reason, the cell wall is spread apart, creating an environment where fluid can run through. So that's why runny nose is an example of the relaxed energetic. And then finally, constricted is matching with number 6 here, muscle spasm. Again, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. When we're having a muscle spasm, our muscles are like tense and tightening, and that's just a perfect example of the constricted tissue state. And here's another example of the opposite, where we need to apply relaxing energetics to help balance that tissue state. Okay, so if the idea of tissue states has felt foreign to you up until now, this is where we'll get into them. The 6 tissue states describes qualities of bodily tissues in a way that reflects the elemental patterns. They provide an energetic framework from which we can understand the body and identify our clients' individual needs. As herbalists, we have the opportunity to influence the tissue states. Using our herbal energetics framework, we can create specific and effective herbal formulas that help to bring the tissues into balance, supporting optimal holistic health. So the first tissue state here, you've heard me talk about it already, but we're talking about heat excitation, which is excess heat and heightened cellular and or systemic activity, which often manifests as inflammation, irritation, and an overstimulated physiological response. The next one's cold depression. It's a lack of vitality, slowed physiological processes, and an overall sense of coldness. Tissues are underactive, vulnerable, and unresponsive to nerve stimulation and need to be warmed and revitalized. So again, here you see that the opposite of each other, right? And so we've got one hot, two cold, right? Those are the herbal energetics as applied to the tissue states. Okay. The next would be dry atrophy, which is excessive dryness and a loss of vitality in the tissues. They are dehydrated, withered, and malnourished. They are not receiving nutrients or clearing waste due to lack of fluids, and they need to be hydrated, built up, and nourished by food, water, and healthy fats. A really great visual that I learned about the dry atrophic tissue state is to think about a plant that you have neglected for way too long and hasn't been watered in months and months and months. And then when you go to water it, the water kind of pools on top, but then like sinks through. It's like the soil has no ability to absorb. It's been so dried out and neglected. Like it needs a ton of kind of nourishment over time, a lot of care to get it back to sort of a supple, fertile environment that's able to receive nutrition. And so you can see this visual of, you know, an elderly person's hand. It's also just a natural process of sadly aging and sort of, you know, declining. Is this dry atrophic tissue state. So the more we can nourish that, the better. Number 4, constriction and tension is excessive tension, tightness, and constriction in the body. Individuals experiencing this tissue state may exhibit physical and emotional symptoms related to heightened stress and the inability to relax. Okay, and number 5, lax atony is weakness and lack of tone in the tissues of the body. Tissues can't hold on to fluids or minerals, which leads to malnourishment. They may appear loose, flaccid, or lacking in vitality. This condition can affect various systems of the body, including the muscles, skin, and organs. And so, some examples of the lax atonic tissue state would be this image is representing a varicose vein. And so, you can kind of see in that the vein has lost tonality, and like blood is pooling there where it should be kind of tight and more tone and moving. It's stagnating due to the lax nature of the tissue there. Another more severe example of this would be things like organ prolapse, where it's just like completely lacking tone. And another really relatable example is if you haven't exercised in a really long time and you experience the kind of the lax and the loss of tone in your muscles. That would be an example of the lax atonic tissue state. And so finally, damp stagnation is an accumulation of excess dampness and a lack of movement in the body. This pattern often leads to a variety of symptoms related to poor circulation, sluggish metabolism, and a sense of heaviness. So damp stagnation, I'm just thinking as I'm presenting here that in the lax atonic tissue state, which it made that tissue state created a damp stagnant condition where the blood is pooling in the vein. So here's like just an example of the way they kind of relate to each other, right? So this image within the damp stagnant tissue state is just a woman's foot who is, or her ankles really rather, that are just swollen and swelling. And so the fluids of the body are sort of stuck there. They're not circulating, and they've stagnated at the bottom of her foot, which is most likely creating discomfort, but certainly creating swelling. And another nice visual for damp stagnation is this idea of fluid, or rather like a swamp, you know, it's like water that is stagnant. And what happens in stagnant water, right? Like it's oftentimes there's heat and there's, you know, bacterial life that's able to thrive. So it just doesn't create a healthy ecosystem. It stagnates and kind of gets boggy. Okay, so let's do a little quiz here for the tissue states. Match each of the 6 tissue states to their corresponding bodily representation. So again, the tissue states being lax atony, damp stagnation, dry atrophy, heat excitation, cold depression, and constriction and tension. So number 1, bruising, bloating, and edema. Number 2, fever, anxiety, hyperthyroidism, and allergies. Number 3, slow digestion, hypothyroidism, poor circulation, number 4, dry skin and hair, or dehydration. And number 5, muscle cramps, twitching, and seizures. And number 6, varicose veins, prolapsed organs, or runny nose. Okay, so let's start with lax atony, and I'll give you a second to see if you can figure out what that one matches with. So we talked a little bit about this in previous slides, but if you're having a hard time matching them up, no worries. It matches with number 6, which is varicose veins, prolapsed organs, and runny nose. So again, that lax atonic tissue state. And, you know, atony or atonic is just, it's a lack of tone in the tissue. So that creates can create like a running, like fluid leaking situation. But it also can just create like that, what we talked about with the varicose veins. The veins don't have the tone, so it causes this pooling of blood in the veins. And then again, the prolapsed organs is just, it's just that lack of tone in the tissue. And like we talked about with muscles, when you're not toning and exercised and keeping it healthy, it just sort of loses its tone and ability to properly function. Okay, damp stagnation. So this one matches with number 1, bruising, bloating, and edema. And so bruising is, you know, that's stagnation. That's blood. You know, you've had the injury, the blood flows to the area and it stagnates, or the blood is actually from the capillaries being damaged, right? So the blood has stagnated, and that's what a bruise is, right? So when something's stagnant, we need to bring kind of movement and heat to the area to clear it. So that's an example of damp stagnation, would be bruising, but also bloating and edema, which are both examples of fluid in the body that's sort of trapped. It's not moving, and it needs help circulating and moving and clearing from the body. And dry atrophy. This one matches best with number 4, dry skin and hair and dehydration. So again, that's the example of the, you know, the one that I talked about with the soil that has been dried out so long that it's no longer able to receive nourishment. And so dry skin and hair, they just need a lot of nourishment through more fluid, more oils, and same with, you know, general dehydration in the body. It's like the tissues need to be hydrated. And they also may need to be nourished so that they can receive the hydration. Heat excitation. So this one matches best with number 2, fever, anxiety, hyperthyroidism, and allergies. So all of these conditions are indicating an excessive response, right? So fever, and you see there's heat within a fever, and it's the immune system reacting. It's overstimulated, but it's reacting to a pathogen in the body. So it's necessary, but it is an example of the heat excitation tissue state. Anxiety, that's very much an overexcited mental kind of state. And hyperthyroidism is when the thyroid specifically is kind of overreacting. And again, allergies is the immune system responding to what feels like an invasion. And so the immune system is over responding. So these are all examples of the heat excitation tissue state. Okay, next is cold depression. Okay, so this matches with number 3, slow digestion, hypothyroidism, and poor circulation. So slow digestion is it's showing that like lack of vitality. It's underactive and it needs to be stimulated. So it's that opposite again of the heat excitation there. Hypothyroidism, opposite of hyperthyroidism, where the thyroid is underactive rather than overactive. And poor circulation, it's just kind of this sedated coldness where circulation is not moving and it needs some heat, needs some stimulation and excitation. Okay, finally, constriction and tension, which obviously matches with number 5, muscle cramps, twitching, and seizures. So we talked a little bit about muscle cramps, but twitching, again, is like the nervous system is having some kind of response that is very clearly constricting and relaxing. So that's an example where we're looking at constriction and tension. And then seizures as well. It's you can see that it's this seizing. I mean, it's in the word, right? Like this tensing of the body. So those are ways of looking at constriction and tension in the body. Okay, so moving right along to the Ayurvedic 6 flavors. Ayurveda recognizes the effects of different foods and herbs on the body and mind. Defining and familiarizing ourselves with the 6 flavors is a powerful way to strengthen our understanding of plant energetics. Much can be determined about the medicinal qualities of a plant through its taste. They can be correlated with herbal actions and even certain constituents with a refined palate. So the 6 flavors are sweet, salty, sour, pungent, bitter, and astringent. Starting with the sweet flavor, it is made up of complex carbohydrates and proteins. It provides us with basic nutrition and nourishment for the body and mind and is associated with satisfaction and contentment. It is correlated with the earth and water elements. And a quote from Kat Meyer, sweet is the subtle flavor of grains and roots. Its energetics are moistening and cooling. And we often think of sweet, when we think of sweet, we think of sugar. But sugar is really the far end of the spectrum when it comes to the sweet flavor. And the sweet flavor, as Kat Meyer mentions here, is that subtle flavor of grains and roots, which actually is still sweet. It just doesn't really compare to sweet in the form of sugar. And salty. The salty flavor includes both the taste of sodium chloride as well as mineral salts such as calcium, magnesium, potassium, etc. Minerals are deeply nourishing and essential for proper functioning of the body. The salty taste is believed to have a hydrating effect, promoting the retention and balance of fluids in the body. It's associated with water and fire, and the energetics of the salty flavor are moistening and warming. And here again, salty, we often think of table salt. And again, that's sort of the far end of the spectrum as far as the salty flavor is concerned. And so these mineral salts aren't flavors that we're as familiar with, but we're kind of learning to recognize these flavors as we work with the flavors and familiarize ourselves with them. And sour. The sour flavor creates a sensation of contraction or tightening of the mucous membrane in the mouth. This astringing causes fluid to extract from the tissues. The contraction tones the tissues, making it strong, which lends to optimal nourishment and hydration of the tissue. Because of this, the sour flavor is considered locally drying, yet systemically moistening and cooling. The tightening also helps to stimulate digestion. It's associated with fire and earth. I like to think of the heat as vitality in this example, in the example of sour. Sour antioxidants, in other words, flavonoids, cool the tissues and are actually protective against oxidative stress, in other words, heat and inflammation. And that's a quote from Kat Meyer. The sour flavor is often berries and sour fruits and Yeah, kind of makes you pucker. And pungent. The pungent flavor refers to spicy and acrid flavors. It has a stimulating and invigorating quality, increasing the internal heat of the body. High in volatile oils, they increase circulation, draw blood flow to the tissues, and encourage secretion of bodily fluids. They warm the digestive fire, which improves digestion and assimilation. The heating and drying nature of the pungent taste can help manage excess mucus and congestion and is believed to have a stimulating effect on the mind and senses. It's associated with fire and air, and energetically, the pungent taste is considered warming, drying, and stimulating. And this category really includes pretty much all of the culinary spices, as well as anything that has like a high aroma, and the aroma is due to the essential oils, or in other words, the volatile oils. And the bitter flavor, here you see a picture of chocolate, my favorite food. The bitter flavor is associated with its ability to help eliminate waste and purify the blood, as it supports detoxification and cleansing processes in the body. It stimulates the digestive system by activating bitter receptors in the mouth, enhancing the secretion of digestive juices and promoting peristalsis. And it encourages the breakdown and absorption of nutrients and has an overall purifying effect on the body. It's associated with air and ether, and it is considered cooling and drying energetically. And bitters are often taken like 15 minutes or so before eating a meal because it kind of primes the digestive system for the meal to come. And astringent. The astringent flavor causes a tightening of mucous membranes in the mouth, which creates a puckering or drying sensation and can be beneficial for conditions where there is excessive mucus secretions or wetness. Astringent is recognized as a taste in Ayurveda, but in other systems it is considered more as a sensation rather than a flavor. And that's a quote by Kat Meyer from Energetic Herbalism. It is associated with air and earth, and the constricting and toning effect on tissues contributes to the strengthening and firming various bodily structures. Energetically, the astringent taste is considered cooling and drying. So astringency is rather similar to the sour flavor as far as its action, but it does have slightly different energetics. Okay, and here's our pop quiz. So match each of the 6 flavors to their corresponding plant counterparts. Working with sweet, salty, sour, bitter, pungent, and astringent. And number 1, oats, marshmallow root, astragalus root. Number 2, nettles, horsetail, dandelion leaf. Number 3, blue vervain, motherwort, and mugwort. Number 4, blackberry root, yarrow, and witch hazel. Number 5, hawthornberry, hibiscus, and rosehips. And number 6, garlic, ginger, and thyme. So if you're new to herbalism, this might be a little bit challenging, but we'll just work through it and see where we get. So I'll give you a minute to decide which of these 6 examples correlates best with the sweet flavor. Okay, so if you remember, we talked about the sweet flavor being that subtle flavor of grains and roots. So if you guessed number 1, you would be right. We have oats here, marshmallow root, and astragalus root. Moving on to salty. So if you're familiar with herbalism, you might be aware that nettles, horsetail, and dandelion leaf are all considered nutritive tonic herbs, and that's because of their mineral content and their just nutrient content. They're essentially like taking a multivitamin if you drink these tea with these herbs in it every day. So salty correlates best with number 2 here because of these herbs, their mineral content. Okay, next is sour. So sour correlates with number 5, hawthornberry, hibiscus, and rose hips, which are all Hibiscus and rosehips especially are classically considered sour herbs, and then most of the berries are sour as well. And so hawthornberry, hibiscus, and rosehips would be the answer for sour, and it might be tricky here with blackberry root. You might have thought of it just because it's a berry, but in this case, number 4 correlates with something else. So let's move on to bitter. Bitter is number 3. Blue vervain, motherwort, and mugwort. And again, if you're not familiar with herbalism, you might not have been able to guess this one, but these 3 herbs are classically extremely bitter. So if you ever have a chance to taste one of them, you'll understand what that's all about. Next is pungent. And pungent correlates with number 6, garlic, ginger, and thyme. So you have these 3 kind of spicy-ish herbs, and that spice is exactly what the pungency is. It comes from the essential oils, the volatile oils, and these are all highly aromatic herbs, and so that's your indicator that they are that pungent flavor. And finally, astringent. And last but not least, number 4, blackberry root, yarrow, and witch hazel. Witch hazel might be an easy one for those who aren't that familiar with herbs, just because it's so classically used as a facial toner, and so it tones, astringes, and kind of tightens up the skin. And same with blackberry. Blackberry root is classically used to help with diarrhea, and so that's kind of astringing and tightening and toning the tissues of the digestive tract. Yarrow also is classically used as a poultice, and you can so you can essentially like take a yarrow leaf, crush it up. Some people even chew it up, and then apply it topically to a scrape that's bleeding, and it will astringe and tighten the tissue so much so that it stops the bleeding. And so that's called a styptic, and yarrow is a classic styptic. Okay, so integration. Applying herbal energetics to tissue states. Once we have identified the predominant tissue state in our clients, we can select herbs with the energetic qualities that will address their specific imbalances. Learning to identify tissue states and apply corresponding energetics is a skill that requires practice and experience. As we deepen our understanding of energetics and refine our diagnostic abilities, we become more competent and skilled herbalists, capable of supporting a wide range of health concerns. And we work on developing these skills in the Herbalist Collaborative. It's essentially why I created the Herbalist Collaborative, was to deep into this herbal energetics practice. Okay, so the heat excitation tissue state, if you have a client who's showing signs of heat excitation, which might look like redness, inflammation, an overactivity of some kind, whether, like we talked about earlier, hyperthyroidism, an excessive allergy response, skin conditions, things like that. So the energetics that we're going to choose for that client are going to be cooling energetics. The corresponding flavors are sweet, sour, and bitter. And the herbal actions, demulcents, nervines, adaptogens, and some herbal examples, marshmallow root, lemon balm, and dandelion root. And so, this is an example of where you're going to select herbs here that are going to support your client the most. So marshmallow root is cooling. It also is moistening. So that's going to help in like a dry, hot condition. Whereas lemon balm is actually very cooling and soothing to the nervous system. So that's where you're going to, if you're seeing heat in the nervous system, that might be where you see that anxiety flaring up, or even anger, excitation of any kind, overstimulation. So you would choose lemon balm in that example, which is your nervine. And finally, dandelion root is, that's a bitter herb. And so bitter herbs naturally help detox the body, kind of opens the channels of elimination, as Sajah Popham puts it. And so that's clearing heat in the body. And so all three of these examples are would be chosen for different reasons, but they all are going to soothe some kind of heat excitation tissue state. And so if you have a client presenting with a cold, depressed tissue state, the corresponding energetics that we're looking for here is something warming and stimulating. The flavor profile would be pungency. The herbal actions, aromatics, carminatives, and bitters. And the herbs, ginger, thyme, and valerian. The dry atrophic tissue state. This corresponding energetics here would be moistening, so we want to moisten and nourish these tissues. Corresponding flavors, sweet and salty, to nourish and hydrate. The herbal actions, nutritive tonics, demulcents and emollients. And some herbal examples, milky oats, plantain, and ashwagandha. And lax atony. Corresponding energetics here is drying, so we're looking to like astringe and dry those tissues, tighten and tone those tissues. So the corresponding flavor being astringent, the herbal actions, diuretic, digestive tonics, and astringents, and some herbal examples, yarrow, parsley, and raspberry leaf. The damp, stagnant tissue state, the corresponding energetic here would be drying. The flavor would be bitter for its purifying effect. And the herbal actions, alteratives, astringents, bitters, circulatory stimulants. Some herbal examples, gentian, rosemary, and nettle. And finally, the constriction and tension tissue state, corresponding energetic here is warming. The flavor profile, pungency, specifically the acrid flavor, which has a relaxing effect on the tissues, and herbal actions, spasmolytics, nervines, circulatory stimulants, and aromatics. And some herbal examples, valerian, skullcap, rosemary, and cramp bark. So to recap, the 5 elements provide us with a framework that mirrors nature in order for us to observe and influence the most basic patterns in life. The energetic qualities describe the expression of the elements and are used to classify the energetic qualities of plants as well as human tissue states. The 6 tissue states describe qualities of bodily tissues in a way that reflects the elemental qualities. And the 6 flavors, with their inherent energetic qualities, can be employed by herbalists to address specific tissue state imbalances. This is a lot, I know. The topic of energetics is complex and takes years of study and practice to integrate. What I love so much about energetics is that it is by nature intuitive. We all can access and learn this language. And this is a quote by Sajah Popham. The true herbalist is not just trained by others who heeded the same calling, but is instructed by the wisdom of the natural world, a student of the plants themselves. This quote sums up my inspiration behind the Herbalist Collaborative, where we put everything from this presentation into practice. We deepen our connection with plants through our herbal energetic practice. We connect with nature and nurture our community, and all of us are developing our unique offerings as healers and herbalists. Everything that we studied here today is also in my Energetics for Herbalists online program. So if you're ready to immerse yourself, we have options here. Again, the Energetics for Herbalists course, which is going on sale today, and I have a coupon code for you in the next slide, is like your intro level. It's suitable for anyone interested in studying herbalism, but it does come from this energetic lens. And then from there, if you are ready to go, like, join today, because this coupon code is good for a week, and this will prep you for the Herbalist Collaborative if you're interested in joining but not sure if you're ready for that level of study. But if you do have experience and you feel like everything we covered today felt kind of comfortable for you, then you are more than welcome to join the Herbalist Collaborative, which will be available or begins in October. So I have a wait list for that. You're more than welcome to join the wait list. And yeah, stay tuned for more information on that. And then finally, the interactive workshops, where you can come join a workshop. They will be about an hour long, and they will be led by Kat Meyer and a couple of other guest speakers this year. So stay tuned for that as well. As soon as we have all that information, it will be available for you. So whether you're just beginning your herbal studies or looking for your next step, we have what you need and would love for you to join our community. Enroll today. So the coupon code is capital EFH40, and you will save 40% off if you enroll this week in our Energetics for Herbalists course. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss about any of the information we went over today. I'm so grateful that you joined my webinar, and I look forward to hearing from you.